Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And we are back on our little podcast series here called The Acolyte Appetite. We're talking about The Acolyte, episode number 8, The Acolyte, which is the season 1 finale, directed by Hanelle Culpepper and written by Jason Micallef. I know, we just said the word Acolyte quite a lot, but listen, we really love The Acolyte. I think that's 8 times, so it's all come full circle that we've said Acolyte. Oh no, right, I just said it for the 9th time. I messed it up.
Right, and well, that means that there's got to be more episodes now, right? If you said it 8 times, so I think that we should renew The Acolyte.
In fact, we might need to say Acolyte maybe another 100 times. One might say for maybe a 10-season run.
What? Now we're thinking.
Listener,
now you're thinking.
You're going to have an obligation here on this episode. Count how many times we say The Acolyte. You total that. That's how many episodes of The Acolyte we're getting.
Right.
Full disclosure, you heard it here first. We are manifesting in this Chili's tonight.
We're manifesting, and we are also, our names are Bob and Iger. So
true. We
have the power to make that happen. So the more times we say The Acolyte, the more episodes there will be. And that's canon. Daniel Jose Older approved.
It would actually be more canonically correct if your name was Bob and my name was Bob, because we've only ever had Bob CEOs of the Walt Disney Company. So canonically correct that way. But I'll take
our last names both Iger?
No.
I mean, it'd be kind of funny if we were like a Taylor Lautner and his wife Taylor sort of a vibe, but like as a podcast duo.
Are you saying Bob and Bob are going to get married?
No, I'm just saying that Bob and Bob are like quite a team. But I just don't want to. I forgot what the last Bob's name, Chapek. I just don't want to label either of us as Bob Chapek. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, we're different Bobs. As long as we have the name Bob, it's the prophecy of Bob being fulfilled.
Got it.
So with the power of Bob invested in both of us, I now pronounce us Acolyte Season 2 renewed.
Oh. Yep, got it.
Hashtag renew the Acolyte, please.
Seriously,
please.
I'm living in this state of limbo is like actually killing me. Like the more that I think about it, the more frustrated I get, and like the more that I feel like I'm going insane, because I feel like I've finally been handed everything that I've ever wanted, and then it's like, but will we give you more? And I'm like, but I'm hungry. Give me my next meal. And they're like, who knows? I feel like I'm being tortured. I feel like a game is being played with me right now. And I'm just a girl. I'm a wee baby. I can't handle stressful things like this.
Can we just have some fun? Disney? Can you just please renew the Acolyte? We are going through one major historical world event after another. I just want to have a little fun. I just want to turn my TV on a Tuesday night and watch 2 hot Sith people stare out at the ocean and hold hands and potentially kiss in season 2 of The Acolyte. Like I want a training session that is sweaty, intense, full of anger. And how do you let that anger out? In a sweaty Sith training session, you kiss. And that's what I want.
You're so very real for saying like that. And I think that the sweat is actually a really important factor.
Very, very important. Baby oil specifically, as Manny Jacinto said in his interview. It's all about the baby oil.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Glistening just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Have we said a little much about ourselves saying this?
Wow, this episode has started on a weird note, but we're going to continue forward because we love getting weird here on this podcast. We are coming to you a little later than intended, but that's okay because we saved the best for last. Busy week, but we're here.
So did the Acolyte in the episode, The Acolyte.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Full spoilers ahead. You have now been warned.
Of course.
And we'll talk through all the big moments, big themes, things that stuck out to us, things we loved, revelations, a certain tragedy or two.
No tragedy here. This is Star Wars. No tragedies in Star Wars.
No.
Just happy times.
Happy times. But don't fret, because we will be back talking about The Acolyte probably in a couple of weeks. We'll do a little season recap, talk all about it. We'll bring on a special guest. Going to be a lot of fun. We'll have you send in some questions, listener. So stay tuned to hear more on that. But this will not be the last time we talk about The Acolyte. We're going to keep talking about it. because we want it back in our life. So
that's correct. That being said, we should probably just kind of dive into our initial overall thoughts on this episode. What was your experience watching it? Let's kick it off there, Brad.
Yeah. Okay. So I, like any finale of anything, I always go in with like, you know, that feeling in your stomach when you're about, were you a swimmer? Were you ever a swimmer?
Yeah, I was.
You know, like when you're on the diving block and you're about to jump in the water, like before the gun goes off, and you just feel like in your stomach, you're like, I have to pee. I have butterflies. I want to throw up. I need to do all the things.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. Also that. Yeah. So that was me going into this finale.
Am I falling off the block today?
I was like, this episode was like, am I going to dive in or am I going to fall off the block? And luckily we dove in. We did a nice little Michael Phelps smooth dive. See how I'm connecting it to the Olympics. Olympics are this week, opening ceremonies. Wow. It's all connected.
That's
key to all of this. Michael Phelps showing up in the Acolyte season 2 confirmed. Big time, big time.
Interesting.
But this was a smooth sailing finale. I feel like it hit all the beats I wanted it to hit. It took the direction of the characters that I wanted it to take it. And like ultimately, despite the tragedy of it all and, you know, some dark choices that are made by some characters, specifically Osha, you know, Osha fully turning to the dark side in some ways and killing that paternal figure in her life as sort of that final catharsis, that final emotional retribution, as Amanda called it in her Entertainment Weekly interview. I feel like that was just such a powerful way to end the season. And it's the triumph from the perspective of like, we're as viewers not supposed to be happy that Soul died. We're not supposed to feel like he deserved it. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about the perspective of these characters being sort of rooted in just an alternative point of view outside of the Jedi. This is a show about what if you existed outside of the institution and didn't follow the institution's ways? Maybe there was another path. And what's compelling about that is to see and understand, you know, why Chimera is in the position that he's in, what he is after, what motivates him. And he's not just sort of this one note villain that is just evil for the sake of being evil. Like, he clearly has some deeply rooted trauma, and he is an outcast, and he is now comfortable with who he is. And seeing now Osha kind of careen towards that and become comfortable with who she is and recognize that, like, this is kind of probably at her heart who she has always been, and that's why she was never a successful Jedi. Like, it just all came together in this episode, and I just yapped a lot, but ultimately I'm trying to say, like, emotionally satisfying. The season ended with some catharsis. I'm happy about that. There's a lot set up for season 2, but even if the show were to end here, I feel like I got a complete story.
Right. I definitely agree with that. Although if it ended here, like, I'd just be really mad. Like, it would, I feel like if it did end here, like, it would taint the way that I feel about the story because it didn't get that resolution that I was ultimately hoping for in future seasons based on the seeds that they planted. Because I am so eager for that. Right.
Like, there's still so much more to tell, but like within this season, it told a complete arc.
Like, we didn't go throughout the whole season without Soul dying, like, or getting a resolution on the Brendock 4, sort of a like the 4 Jedi and the moment on Brendock. Like, we got closure on that, which is what ultimately the story is about, which I'm grateful for. I'll say a little bit for me. I had requested the TV with my family. I said, family, I'm going to need the television from 8 to 9 p.m. tomorrow. And you can come and sit with me, but you're not allowed to speak. Because my mom will ask me questions and I can't handle that while I'm watching this show.
At least on the first watch, like second, third watch, mom, fire away.
Right. But on the first watch, and then I was watching it and yapping, and my dad was like, so you're allowed to talk, but we're not allowed to talk. And I said, that's correct. I make the rules. Because I had a lot of audible reactions, and my dad was like very silently putting the dishes away. And he's like, you're allowed to talk. This isn't fair. And I was like, I don't care whether it's fair or not.
Yeah, this is not a democracy. This is an autocracy full on.
Right. And I don't get the TV very often. So I just wanted my hour. And then I'll leave. Anyway, I had a wild time watching this. episode. I felt like it moved so well, so snappy, and I had a great time with it. And then the end, I was like, oh my gosh, here we are, the end, the beautiful shot against the sea. And then I was like, oh, beautiful end shot. And then we see the next shot of like Vernestra rounding the corner. And I was like, oh, not the end shot. It was a very funny moment.
Those little green, wrinkly, hairy ears once again showing up in my Star Wars. I gotta admit, I was a little giddy about it.
I was mad, but I was also like, that's Puppet Yoda. That's Puppet Yoda. I said, Mom, I paused it. I was like, Mom, look at the wrinkle on his head. Look at his hairs. That's a puppet. Like, I was so excited about Puppet Yoda, but I was so mad that Yoda was there at all. And then I texted you and you were like, Sarah, you really don't like the zingers because you didn't like the Death Star at the end of Andor. And I said, the Death Star at the end of Andor, ? I blocked that out. I was
out of her mind completely.
Yeah, let these things end where they naturally conclude, where you feel the emotional resolution. I don't need the tag, I don't need the zinger, but that was a funny experience. But overall, like I really enjoyed this final episode. I thought it moved so well, and I was saddened but satisfied. I felt like we got all the beats that we needed to hit. The resolution between Sol and Osha, the resolution between Osha and May, some epic fighting, Osha and Chimere. Like we got all of those moments. Vernestra versus the world, etc. So I was happy with it. I am happy with it. I've been thinking about it all week.
It feels like a really good length for an episode. And not that you can't have a snappy and effective 30-minute episode, because we saw that with Night, we saw that with Day. I think Teach Corrupt was about that long as well.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it felt good to get to that Rain Court Vernestra scene and like get to the end of that. And I'm like, I feel like we were there for a minute, and I paused it and it was like 35 minutes left. I was like, oh my God, like we just got so much, and there's still so like, we're only in it a couple of minutes. And that was really, really a refreshing feeling to just be like, we're taking our time with this one. We're taking our sweet time. It's not just like the quick, messy battle and, you know, some sort of like quick resolution. Like, no, we're actually going to probably sit in some of these moments. And I definitely felt that between, you know, Sol walking through the witch's castle on Brendock and, you know, facing his past and just sitting in so many of those quieter moments with JJ acting and being frightened by the environment that he's been put back into, you know, his greatest failure, or if it's just Amanla talking to herself as her sister, as their twin sister. And in those moments, or even just like under the Bunta tree, right? Like there's just so many brilliant, quieter moments in this episode. And I think oftentimes with these big IPs, we think the finale is going to be like this big bombastic, like, you know, WandaVision style, where it's like Wanda's flying in the sky against Agatha Harkness, which like visually is fun to look at. But like, I really like kind of the Loki of it all, where it's like the Loki finale of season 1 was like, they just talked for 45 minutes and that was pretty cool. And I kind of got that vibe from this. Like now, granted, there was like one of the top 10 lightsaber duels I've ever seen, one might say, like pretty damn good. I would consider that in the top 10 of all time, like greatest fighting choreography. I think this cemented the Acolyte as like some of the best, if not the best, but it was really the emotion that drove home this finale for me. Not the fighting, although the fighting was a little extra flavor.
It was the thumbs that drove home the finale for me.
Oh.
It's a good caress of the thumb, if you will. Was just deeply satisfying to my soul. Really appreciated that. So thank you to Manny Jacinto for your work in thumb caresses. Beautiful stuff. Mm-hmm. Big fan.
I do love a thumb in my media. That's why I'm a big Spy Kids fan.
I knew you were going to do that.
Big fan of the thumbs and Spy Kids.
That's
Robert Rodriguez directed Star Wars. It's all connected.
You're like, it's all connected.
Listen, all I'm saying is that ever since Robert Rodriguez directed the Book of Boba Fett, we have now gotten a thumb caress in Star Wars. And I'm not saying there's not a connection, but I'm also not saying there's not a connection to more thumbs in our Star Wars.
I think this means, though, that we need to bring actor Alan Cumming into Star Wars.
I think that also needs to happen.
Like,
what are we doing?
Like, what are we doing?
Who would Alan Cumming play? Like, let's take a really quick detour. Is he in the Acolyte?
Literally anybody. Literally anybody. I don't care. I just want him to be there. I just want him to have a great moment.
He should voice Plagueis, is what I'm saying.
I mean, why not? Why not?
But we'll get to that.
You were talking about the pace.
Sure.
And the length of this episode. And I just wanted to hit on that too, because do we want to, we'll get there. The scene with Ray in court, when he comes in and David Harewood is introduced as Ray in court, and I'm like, yes, I'd love to see it. That scene is so snappy, and we're getting so much meat in the dialogue. And we don't always get a ton of meat in the dialogue. Like, it often feels like live action TV Star Wars can have like exposition style dialogue instead of meat in the dialogue, especially outside of Andor, which has a lot of meat in the dialogue. And I felt like we were getting towards like the snappiness of Andor, the thing I love about Andor, which is like it's so smart. And so that was the moment when I was like, oh, we're really moving. We're going crazy today. Like, I love this. But yeah, I stopped the episode right as it started, and I was like, oh, 40 minutes. Solid, good. So I was glad that it was a little bit longer than the 30-minute episodes we've been getting prior, especially so those have been ending often on cliffhangers as a tease for the next episode. So I was glad that we got a little bit more time and a resolution.
Yeah, totally. I mean, while we're talking about Ray in court versus Vernestra, do you just want to sit here a little longer and talk about it? Because I think it's a good place to start, because this is sort of a scene that kind of encapsulates the thesis statement of the show, which is the Jedi aren't evil. I don't think that's the takeaway we should get from this whole season of like, the Jedi are bad, period. I don't think that's what we walk away with. I think what we walk away with, and Leslie has said this in an interview on StarWars.com. The theme of the show is duality and reflection. So the good guys also have to admit the parts of them that are bad. I don't see the Jedi as antagonists. I see them as flawed. And it was a story that I felt really excited to tell. And I think that's kind of all Ray in court is saying here. You know, like he recognizes that his peers in the Senate really look up to the Jedi as heroes. But oftentimes, like when you're looking at your heroes, that's kind of the hardest thing to really actually look at what's in front of you. And that's kind of what he says to Vernestra is like, you don't want your heroes to fail you. You don't want to like admit their wrongdoings, and you don't want to admit they're flawed. Look at every YouTuber with 3-hour video essay on The Last Jedi that doesn't like that version of Luke Skywalker. It's a hard thing to do, to look at your heroes and admit their wrongdoings, right? And I think that's what the show really challenged us to do. It's not to say, hey, the dark side's great, we should all go on the dark side. Like, we know the dark side's wrong. We know selfishness is wrong. We know those things that the dark side teaches and kind of roots itself in are bad emotions that you shouldn't feel, like greed and selfishness and like those sorts of things, right? I think there's definitely nuance in the middle of those two ends of the spectrum for sure. And I think that the show sits in that gray area, sits in that middle. But the show is really saying like, this is an institution that has too much power, and what happens when it goes unchecked.
Right. It's so interesting because it's like, we have separation of church and state currently, but I would like there to be less separation of church and state, in the sense that I think the church has too much power in the state, and we need to think about that. But ultimately, like, it entangles them so far to the point where the church is the state, which is a funny thing because that's kind of what Ray in court is trying to avoid. He's saying the church is too much of the state right now, so let's have the state preside over the church, but then the church becomes the state later on. It's interesting. It's compelling. But I really loved David Harewood's performance. I really hope we get a second season because we deserve more of him, because he's such a great actor. And I just thought the way that he brought so much to this role and was only given essentially a single scene and a little tag at the end of the Vernestra's monologue. He's just kind of there. And I thought we got so much from him in that moment. And clearly him and Vernestra have an interesting relationship because she asks, or he says, you don't like me. You think that my campaign for an external review of the Jedi is a personal vendetta. And she's like, in my honest opinion, I do. Yes. And it's like, oh, interesting. So they know each other in some sort of way where they've butt heads before, I think.
Oh, totally. Because he also opens the conversation when he's like, I heard you traveled through hyperspace. Like, how's your stomach? You know, teasing her. And she's like, it's actually my head and I'm fine.
Right. Which is so interesting. What does the Senate know about Vernestra and her vision? Like, what do people know?
Yeah, well, I believe Vernestra came forward and I think it was Defy the Storm and told the council about her visions. Now, she didn't tell them fully about some of the things she was seeing, particularly Marie Santeca, but you know, letting them know and acknowledging that that's kind of out there. Mm-hmm. So I just find it interesting that Ray is using that to toy with her quite a bit, and like he knows that that's a sensitive spot to press with her, and it'll push her buttons in the completely wrong way and kind of like put her on the defense, and maybe make her misstep and say something that she doesn't want to say, so then he gets more information out of her than he might be hoping for.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of moment that's happening here, because Raincourt also brings up, you know, I'm going to just read some of the quotes here. You've obviously watched the episode, but I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And Vernestra says, we don't control the Force. And he goes, not the Force, your emotions. You project an image of goodness and restraint. It's only a matter of time before one of you snaps. And when, not if, that happens, who will be strong enough to stop him? First of all, I think the gendered stop him as opposed to stop them is interesting. I don't know if I have any specific commentary on that. But there's absolutely like a gendered lens, we can talk about emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Emotional
regulation
capability.
Men have started every war is what you're saying.
I'm not saying that. But the emotional regulation, the emotional, it's okay. I'll find it later. But yeah, the sense of like, because of the way that masculinity exists within a male hegemonic society, which I think we can assume in many ways our universe parallels Star Wars' universe in a number of ways, right? But like the male hegemonic patriarchal society, etc., leads to a system in which men specifically don't have the emotional regulation and emotional maturity to work through some of the things that they're dealing with, because the masculinity constructs like don't allow for that space. Obviously, this is an overarching and very general understanding of like gendered senses of power and gendered expressions, but whatever. That's happening, but also on top of that happening, the Force is happening, and there is no emotion, there is peace, which, if you really think about it, is a bonkers thing to say. No emotion, just peace. No emotion, just peace. And it's like, well, we all have emotions. We all know that Avar and Elzar make eyes at each other all the day long, and that they've been doing that since they were teens, because they don't know how to regulate that. They just experience it and they're told it is bad.
So we want to do it more now because we know it's bad.
Right, of course. So yeah, I really like that Raincourt called out the fact that it's not the Force they seek to control, it's their emotions. But that's a control of the self that is not possible, because it's not control that we should be seeking. It's like understanding and regulation.
Well, yeah, and you're talking about like emotional regulation and emotional maturity. I think applying that lens to the Jedi Order and that Jedi code that you just quoted, the reason, you know, as much as we can blame what happened on Brendok on Sol as the individual, why does Sol think and operate in that way? It's because of his environment. You know, it's kind of like that nature versus nurture. Is Soul like this because he's just inherently, he was born with it? He's just been like that at his core? Or, you know, he was taken when he was 4 years old and raised in an environment where it was impressed on him that you don't feel emotion. There is only peace, right? And when you can't understand emotions, you can't move through them.
Exactly.
You know? And I think it's so interesting with the High Republic. We have these creatures called the Nameless who embody fear. They're fear in a physical form. And they're literally called the Nameless because the Jedi don't understand how they operate. I.e., they don't understand fear because they don't talk about emotion. They don't talk about, they say, you know, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, so don't fear. But like, what does that actually mean to not fear? It doesn't mean don't fear at all. It means to take your fear, understand it, and move through it, right? And so the Jedi, as we get closer and closer to the prequel, are moving further and further away from any ability to talk about emotion. I think the Jedi of the High Republic books talk about that stuff all the time, and I think that's why they're at the height of their power and their golden age, because they have that ability to look each other in the eye and talk about their feelings. We're all human. We all feel it. We're not droids. I think that's a line Vernestra has said before, actually. But there's this quote from a Vulture article that actually just came out today from Leslie, and she's talking about how Vernestra, you know, placing the blame on Soul. And she says she understands Soul was emotionally compromised when she looked around at what happened with these 4 Jedi. Does he deserve to take the fall completely? Of course not. But she has to protect the institution. People get caught up in heroes and villains and get distracted by what's actually going on. It's how the people in power stay in power. It's how we have a country where corporations are considered human beings. And so I think that right there is sort of getting to the point of Vernestra knows probably Ray and Court is right in this situation, and she knows that they lack control of their emotions, but she has to protect the institution at all costs. You know, they can't admit Soul was a product of the Jedi Order. Soul was she calls him a rogue Jedi later, right? Like, he is separate. He is disparate from us. He does not represent us, but in reality, he kind of does.
Right. She's also like protecting the Order by saying, the threat is inside us. The threat is not outside of us. We still, even though one person went rogue, we're still solid. We're not on shaky ground at this point. We're good because our house is built on rock and not on sand. But Chimere is still out there. Plagueis is still out there. Osha is still out there. There are probably other Darksiders, other people who are using the Force in ways that the Jedi would disagree with, that are out there. And so to admit that those people are out there is to admit that you've built your house on sand. And maybe that you were wrong in your conception of the Force, or that you don't actually have the control over the Force that you claim to have.
Yeah, which I think makes Vernestra's admission to the Senate Council just all the more messy, you know? I can assure you, while this is a terrible tragedy, this is the work of one flawed man. And I know we're jumping ahead, but it just feels kind of apt knowing how Ray and Court and Vernestra talk, and then what Vernestra does later on in the episode. And it's just like, this is one flawed man, nothing more to look at here. You know, there is no war in bossing say, you know,
right.
And I know in her heart of hearts, she does not believe that. She is somebody who we've seen before. She became a way seeker in the books. She was down on the Jedi Order after the fall of Starlight, after she lost Stellan Gios. Like, she was downtrodden on the Jedi. And so I'm excited to see how her character plays out in the books, because how does she become somebody who is somewhat cynical about the Jedi Order to then being its cheerleader, being its protector of its image later on in the years leading up to its downfall of the Republic and the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I think that there is maybe an important kind of or valuable transition moment we can have here. And I know, Brad, you normally do such a solid transition, but I just would like to give a go. A little transition, because I think that we can kind of spin this into another location, because Vernestra says to Soul on Brendock, "I'm sorry, friend," which is devastating, because I assume at that point she already knows what she's going to do, and she also is apologizing for the way that things turned out. Yikes, but there's a certain inevitability to that, isn't there? a certain inevitability to this whole thing ending back up on Brendock.
Truly.
You could say that this story happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, that it's already over and that nothing can be done to change it. Of course, it's a story of love and loss, of brotherhood and betrayal, courage and sacrifice, and the death of dreams. It's a story of the blurred line between our best and our worst. And the strange thing, it's a story about the end of an age, of course, but there's a strange thing about stories, Brad. Though all this happened so long ago and so far away that words cannot describe the time or distance, it is also happening right here, right now. Echoes in the Force on Brendock. It's happening as you read, or in this case, listen to these words. Now that is the very first page of the Rotz novelization by Matthew Stover. And I just love it when Star Wars is the Rotz novelization. So I thought I had to bring her back into this conversation because we know where we're heading, right? We know where we're heading. We know we're heading actually to this specific story, Revenge of the Sith, to Return of the Jedi, to The Rise of Skywalker. We know we're heading towards these specific endings, but we also get a certain ending here. And we also see that blurred line between our best and our worst. And maybe our best is our worst in this episode. But also the past and the present with the echoes of what happened on Brendock 16 years ago and what's happening in this moment. And I just love that. I like Star Wars. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. 250 episodes of this podcast later. Never would have thought.
Well,
I also like Star Wars, by the way.
Serious?
Big if true. I will say the taste jumped out. Any opportunity to bring up the Rotz novelization, outstanding stuff. I think we should just end the pod there, honestly. Like, how do you follow up Matthew Stover, really?
Well, you could only follow up Matthew Stover with Matthew Stover. One lone candle can ignite the stars.
Great. There you go.
Oshamir, bye.
But it was really interesting as you were reading that, you mentioned the death of a dream. And I was like, oh, because, let's think back to the end of the first episode of the series, which was, the Acolyte doesn't kill the weapon. The Acolyte kills the dream.
That's right.
And that's exactly what we see end up happening in this episode. It's all fascinating the way that it plays out. Like, it's like a slow motion car crash. It's like, it's coming. And I had a feeling going into this finale, like Soul was just going to be a goner. Like, I was just like, there's no way, if we think Osha's going to the dark side, like what is the one thing that she needs to do in order to do that? It's to pinpoint where her negative emotions come from and kill it. Kill that source of pain, kill that source of grief and of loss. Like all of those things that Kymir tells her, like she's full of in the Teach and Corrupt episode. Like here, May is telling her, he is the source of all of your pain. Soul. He killed our mom.
Yeah.
He is the reason you feel the way you do. He is the reason you could never be a Jedi. She tells Osha in their childhood bedroom, like, you didn't fail yourself. Soul failed you, basically. And wow. I mean, just the transformation of Osha between, this 20-minute sequence is, it's fascinating. But we do see her dream die in this episode. Like we see that dream again of like, I thought I could be a Jedi. My dream was to be a Jedi. You handed me a weapon when I was a kid. And here I am taking that same exact weapon and killing you with it, reclaiming it for myself. The weapon that killed my mom. Holy shit. Like the poetry of this episode is insane.
It's particularly devastating too, because yes, this is the saber that killed her mom and was handed to her as a child. It's the death of her dream and what her life was, but it's also the symbolic death of the goodness of the Force, or like the inherent goodness of the Force. Because if the good, to her, in her eyes, because if the Force is good, then these bad things wouldn't happen. There's a certain like religious saying that's like, well, everything happens for a reason. And maybe she believes that, but she doesn't believe in the reason behind that anymore, because it's not leading her to good ends. It's leading her to the pain she harbors still.
have to bring up this quote from Leslie as we're talking about the killing of Soul. I think this is a really, really interesting one from an interview with our friend Maggie Lovett at Collider. Leslie says, quote, "There's this thing that's called benign sexism, and part of this is paternal protectionism. It seems like this good thing, but like you said, there's this, quote, I have to protect you from everything. I have to make sure you're okay. I have to tell you what track to get on. And then once you're on that track, I need to support you." Ultimately, what happens is, again, this is a father-daughter relationship. As women evolve in their lives and develop their own personalities separate from their fathers, at some point, they have to reject that protectionism. Later on, she continues and says, he's gifting her with this idea. He's gifting her with this dream. And you're exactly right. That dream is also the thing that destroys her world when you're a child. It's also used for that. Then it becomes her own. She takes it from him and claims it as her own. And she's talking a lot about how Osha needed acceptance, not as approval, but the, acceptance of his fate. And, him telling her it's okay is kind of what pushes her forward to give that final fist clench, right? Which, by the way, wasn't even crossing my mind of we've talked a lot about how do you kill a Jedi with a weapon, force choking, never crossed my mind, which how did we never think of that, But the moment, which by the way, the subtitles kind of spoiled it for me because it was I did everything I did because chokes. And then chokes in the subtitles. And I was like, okay, great. So I know it's coming. But I thought that was such a dark and sinister twist. I was just like, oh my God, of course that's how you kill a Jedi without a weapon. Chimere was looking for somebody with the power to do that, to look somebody you loved once in the eyes and choke the life out of them with your fist.
Yeah, it was really sick. It was really sick. Sick and twisted. Because I was like May in episode 4 when she's like, it's impossible. You can't kill a Jedi without a weapon. You can't kill a defenseless person. You can't do that. It's literally impossible. And Chimere's like, he's like, girl, it is not impossible. And she's like, but it is. And anyway, Osha's alive. So I gotta go because my whole worldview has changed. Osha's my girl. I was right where with her.
Yeah. And also the fact that he's not gonna lead her to that conclusion either, right? He's not going to tell her oh, you got to force choke somebody. She's got to find that within herself to make that choice and to do that, right? There's no manipulation. There's no coaching here of Osha by anybody in the situation. She comes out of that doorway hearing what Soul tells them. I killed your mom. Everything I did for you. I wanted to protect you. He says they would have sent you away. You were too old to train. They would have never let you become a Jedi. I did what I thought was best for you. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I couldn't. I kept this from you so you could have the life you've always dreamed of. There's that word again, dream, right? And so the Acolyte kills the dream. It was a dream that was a false dream. It was never going to be reality. Osha was never going to become a successful Jedi. This darkness that was in her has always been within her, and it's what she's needed to tap into. Chimere was that equal, that foil to show her that. And now here she is embracing it, choosing her own path for once in her life with her own agency. And so it's triumphant for her, but we know that it's a tragic path. We know that it's a path that doesn't end in success eventually, or won't end in success, right? The dark side is it takes and it takes and it takes.
Right. And there's a certain catharsis to what her actions, right? But we know that the darkness doesn't lead to satisfaction in oneself in that way, or in a way that you and I would hope for.
Right. It's like a quick dopamine rush, but afterwards you just feel like shit.
Right.
It's Anakin looking at the window where he just threw Mace Windu out of, and he's like, what have I done?
Right.
Felt good in the moment to cut off his hand, I'm sure. But the regret. That's a vicious cycle.
Or it's not the regret, but it's the emptiness hasn't gone away. And that's why you need a girlfriend and or boyfriend and or just general significant other in your dark side force power. And that's why we got Dark Rey too, also. But before we kind of dive into the bleeding of the saber, Osha and Chimere, I want to touch on May and Osha's conversation, because I feel like we really we really need to take a moment to highlight the incredible work that Amanda Stenberg is doing as May and Osha in this big confrontation scene. Because at this point, these two characters have adopted the personality of the other. They have totally switched places, but you can see each character so clearly in this moment. And that is because of Amanda's meticulous and incredible work in differentiating these characters from one another. And I just thought that it was incredible. May's voice when she says, "I didn't do this," is so fragile and weak, and like it's like tiptoeing towards a line of like, can I approach you like this? Can I tell you this truth right now? Meanwhile, my hatred of you, my grief over our mother, which is so low in Amanda's voice as Osha, you can see that she's so stuck in these emotions, and that's obviously what's going to lead her to darkness, into accepting kind of all of that. I loved the way that the intonation of her voice flipped from the beginning, and the way that it differentiated the emotions and everything. And she's playing against herself here. And we also, I think, have to give a huge shout out to her stand-in, who acted against her this entire time, right? Is also playing both roles. We unfortunately never get to see the stand-in's face or hear from them on their process, but we do acknowledge that her work playing against Amanda this whole time is what's helping Amanda deliver these incredible performances on both sides. So shout out to both of them, and also shout out to Amanda for learning both halves of the fight choreography, because that's crazy. That's really wild. Good for them.
Yeah, the fighting, by the way, between these two characters, so good. Like the martial arts, the way that their fighting styles mirror each other almost exactly. You know, they end up in the same pose with their arms out. We get this feral scream from Osha, kind of echoing some of that feral rage that we saw with Rey in The Last Jedi. And like, sometimes women's just got to be mad. You know, women's just got to be angry in the world.
Hey,
that's okay.
We support female rage on this pod.
Yeah, totally.
I am speaking
more of that. More of that. But like, while we're talking about fighting, and maybe before we get into the Kyber bleed of it all, what did you think of Soul versus Chimere? And also the transition, like one moment here, we're a transition with their arms into the sabers, but overall, like the fighting between Soul and Chimere, like, oh, it's so good.
First of all, the transition is so good. The kick to the lightsabers crossed. But I have actually a note. It's almost not fast enough. It almost needs to be like a quarter of a second faster. And I recognize it's like the most nitpicky criticism ever. But that's how much I like this show, is I'm giving you my most nitpicky criticisms ever. It's like me with The Last Jedi. I'm like, Luke says hubris twice, and I just wish his intonation was a little bit different on the second one. So that's
Sarah is slowing down her viewing of the Acolyte to like 0.25 speed. And she's like, no, look, he's not swinging at the thing. He's got to swing faster.
Right. And now the whole fight choreography is bad. And I'm going to convince everybody on the internet that it's bad, even though nobody talked about this for the past 4 years. Nobody thought it was bad until then.
Even though no rational human watches a fights like that and pauses and pauses and pauses, like just literally go outside and touch some grass. Anyways.
My point is, I think that moment could have been even snappier, like even faster. And I would be like, whoa, but I was still like, whoa. Like, it was good. It was really good. I loved that this fight between Soul and Chimere was like out in this broad daylight. It felt so mundane in that way, like in its setting and in the moment. Because like they're not doing much in the color grading that's too wild. They're not they're in a setting that we've been in before, which doesn't have, obviously there are some levels within the setting, but you know, once they're down on the ground, they're down on the ground. It's not like, oh, here we go from platform to platform to platform in Duel of the Fates or what have you, Battle of the Heroes even. But yeah, it's great because the dual lightsaber in Chimere's lightsaber is so dynamic and interesting and cool, and the way that he brings that out and then is dual wielding the sabers is so impressive and fucking awesome. The slow motion like jump to the ground was incredible. The boomerang sabers was so cool. I was so in on that fight, and I'm like not typically like top 10 lightsaber battles. Like that's not typically what I go to Star Wars for. You know, we kind of joke about top 10 lightsaber battles here on the pod. But between episode 5, Night, and this episode, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe I love top 10. Maybe I have a ranking. Maybe I have a list.
Maybe I'm a top 10 lightsabers girly.
Girly, yeah. I respect.
Would we even be considering?
No,
what if we actually did a top 10 lightsabers episode? Come on,
we should.
Let's actually maybe do it now.
Now I have opinions. I have thoughts. Not that I was like I'm not like an anti top 10 lightsabers girls, but it's just like I respect the lightsaber girlies, but I'm not coming to Star Wars necessarily for the lightsaber battles. There are other things that I care about in the Star Wars that I attach myself to a little bit more oftentimes. Anyway, that being the point. But I really love this fight. I really love the choreography. Manny Jacinto is like one incredible performer, and the costume that they put him in, it's just so chef's kiss. Like they were crazy for that. I smooch all of their foreheads. I would like to smooch all of their foreheads and say thank you.
We are also so lucky that we got this fight, because some of the interviews I learned that originally Chimere wasn't even supposed to go to Brendok. You know, we were only supposed to have Osha, May, and Sol have a confrontation, and Chimere's just like, I'll see you when you get back. I'll make you a bowl of soup. But also the fact that, like, 1, he ended up making it to Brendok. 2, this was filmed very, very close to the strikes last summer. So, like, luckily they were able to fit this in. They leveraged a lot more of the stunt people to do some of the work, you know, in addition to Manny, just because of that time crunch. But, like, the way that it ended up turning out was just so like stunning. Every like new moment in this battle was just like, oh my God, like I didn't even think you could do that in a lightsaber battle. Like that is just so freaking cool. And I'm not trying to, you know, draw comparisons out of like a negative way, but like, you know, I kind of thought about this battle in comparison to the Obi-Wan battle, you know, between Obi-Wan and Vader and the latest Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which like I still genuinely love and enjoyed and had a great time with, and I was very emotional about it. But I really do think that just like the environment here, like you said, being on Brendok, being out in the open daylight, it felt a lot different. Whereas I feel like that fight felt very like contained to the volume per se. Like I didn't really feel like they were in a place necessarily. I felt like they were on a soundstage. Whereas on here in the Acolyte, I felt like they were in a place. They were, you know, battling in the hallways, hitting the walls with their sabers. And one point, Chimere's saber goes through a wall. And I'm like, that is so Revenge of the Sith coded. And they came out and said, like, we were inspired by Battle of the Heroes, you know, Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting in the Mustafar hallways, like sparks flying off the wall. Like, that's the kind of shit I love in a battle, like that close claustrophobic feeling of like, I could die in this hallway.
When the lightsabers light up in the hallway and the whole room is bathed in the red and the blue, I'm like, oh, this is sick. This is so cool. And then we go to the outdoors and I'm like, wow, this setting is so plain, because then you're kind of also, you're relying on the choreography, you're relying on the fight, but you're also relying on the emotions of why we're here. Sometimes when you're in the Vader hallway scene, it's just like, oh, this is so sick. This is crazy. Oh my gosh, look at him go. But like when you've stripped away the effect the setting has that elevates the fighting, like once they're on the ground, you really have to rely on the fighting itself and on the emotions of why they're fighting, which I think is great. I love that. We get both of it in this fight.
Any other final thoughts on Sol and the Chimere fight overall before we jump into, I guess, like the end of this fight and the climax of the Chimere of it all?
Oh, can I talk about the mask? We had a conversation and I was like, I gotta have my mask commentary because I wrote a whole page of notes on the mask. Can we do that here and now?
Sure. Yeah, of Chimere's mask.
Great. Of Chimere's mask. Yes. Well, he is the one that wears a mask. In case there's
Which I pre-ordered, by the way, on Amazon. They sold out on Hasbro like super quick, but there were pre-orders on Amazon. So I'm getting my mask.
But you're gonna
next
be
August. Let's go.
A whole year older when you do. Oh yeah, which is
me.
crazy.
I hope I don't die by accidentally eating something I can't have, so I can have my chimera mask in a year.
Nobody feed him Oronto wrap. Nobody feed him Oronto wrap. I'm just so serious right now. A man cannot eat gluten. Okay.
Yeah. My only reason to live at this point is to have my chimera mask in my hands.
Right. And then once you have it, you can wear it all the time.
Right. And then I can die after. That's fine.
Exactly. We'll bury you in it.
Until the Rian Johnson trilogy.
It'll be really cute. Oh,
yeah.
It'll happen.
Still coping.
It's going to happen. It's
still coping.
Yeah. No, it's happening. He's cooking it up. It's on the back burner, but it's simmering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a point at the end of kind of their conflict where he takes off the mask. Chimera takes off the mask, and Soul is once again confronted with him face to face, and he has the opportunity, like this specific opportunity, to kill him for a second time. And he once again does not do it. There's a certain acceptance that Chimera has, I think, on his face of like, if he's going to do it, he's going to do it. I've taken off my mask. I've presented myself to him. It's his choice on the choice that he wants to make, the where he wants to go with his emotions. But I love how easy now, relatively easy, it is for the mask to be taken off, right? Because if we think about other mask, Brad's looking at me. I'm yapping. I'm really sorry.
No, I'm just thinking of the fact that we have a show, and I'm smiling because I'm like, oh, we have a show where characters like can just take off their masks whenever. That's awesome. I love seeing faces in Star Wars. It's so great.
It's so great. But I also feel like Brad's going, oh God, I just really let her go, and now she's gonna yap for 10 minutes. Okay.
No, I love when you yap. It's my favorite part of this podcast. Truly.
Conversations with besties. It's great. Okay. So I love how easy it is for him to take off the mask, because the other mask wearers that we have most notably we've met are Darth Vader and Kylo Ren. These are like our masked villains across the trilogies. And Darth Vader needs a mask to literally breathe. So the mask is not coming off. There's nothing that we can understand on his face because the mask obscures it, of course, until the very end. Then Kylo, he wants to be in the image of Vader, and so he wears the mask as this protective layer, this sense of putting on an outside stronger shield to the world. It's actually not really who he is, but he has to be this sort of person. And I am somebody who, we've obviously talked about this a number of times before, but I am a mask smash scene truther. I am a mask smash scene. That is my Super Bowl. That is my Roman Empire. I think about it. I yell at the TV whenever it happens. It is so important to me because it is a rejection of this identity that he's created for himself and a move towards acceptance of his own self and the role that he's playing within the world, like in understanding actually himself rather than who he could be in the mask, right? And then obviously the mask comes back in Rise of Skywalker. We're forgetting that. We're just going to ignore that part here. But the mask smash happens, and then to me, Kylo Ren becomes so much more interesting. And so I'm so glad that we have a villain who it's easy now for him to take off his mask to show his face to people, because the mask is not his identity. The mask is fundamentally a tool. It is a tool for him to use the Force in a particular way. And yes, at times it is a tool for him to hide from other people in the Force, but it is a tool and is not who he is, which chef's kiss. He knows that he's already revealed himself, and he knows Soul. So at this point, he's kind of got nothing at all to hide. He's not afraid of death, and he just wants to be honest in it. If Soul wants to kill him, he's going to make him honest in it by looking him straight in the eye.
Totally. And Manny had a great quote actually from Entertainment Weekly about that exact point. Like, he's not afraid of death. Manny said, quote, he wants Soul to realize his failings. He wants Soul to tap into his darkness and his anger. And for him, that's already the win. So if he can win like that, then that's all he's ever really wanted. But if he loses, he wants all the drama. He wants you to look into his eye and be like, finish it. And then he goes out with a bang. Like, Manny understands the character, by the way, just so well. I could listen to Manny wax poetic about The Stranger for like days on end. I would never get sick of it. But yeah, no, you're making like such great points here. I love I think the mask symbolism and like what it means for that character is just so fascinating to think about.
As you were talking, I was reading through my page of notes, and I actually said all of my page of notes essentially without actually reading all of my page of notes. So I'm really on it. I really have a clear sense of what this is. But you know, we see like the use of the mask as a tool when he offers the mask to Osha and says, "Put it on. Understand what I feel when I'm in this mask." And she does. It's not an identity for either of them. And I love that the mask isn't the character. The mask enhances the character. And that is really delicious to me because especially with this mask design, which is terrifying, so spooky and creepy, so time to go to the dentist. It's like, it's terrifying because it has the sort of forever smile. But then also once we get the inside perspective of it and the fact that he can't see when he's in the mask, like he's completely relying on the Force pretty much in its entirety in order to envision the space around him, it makes the mask even scarier to me, at least.
I can't believe how far we've come on this podcast in the days like when we saw a trailer drop and we were like, holy shit, what is that thing?
Yeah.
That's so scary. What is I no.
That's our romantic hero, man.
That's possibly the sexiest man who's ever been in a Star Wars. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know, like the character design of Chimere. I haven't felt this jazzed about a character in so long, and just more of why I need more of the show. Like I want to know more of Chimere's backstory, which we'll get into in a second, and how the mask plays into that potentially. But like, God, he's just such a rich character. He's so confident in who he is. He is so resolute. He's so resolute. Like, I hear people saying like Kylo has no Riz. Kylo doesn't have any Riz. I'm sorry. Like he has none. But like Chimere, Riz completely. Like he is like the Riz king.
There's a certainty in there's a
sorry,
certain,
just use Gen Z terms.
Brad sent me a whole video, like a TikTok of like it was like a Gen Z, it was like a Hamilton song parody with a bunch of Gen Z terms, and I really only knew what Riz meant. I was like, am I old?
There's no skibbity toilet in the Star Wars.
I don't know what that means.
I don't either, but it's hilarious. What are the kids saying? What are the kids saying?
These words. That's not important. The point being, Chimere as a super understanding of himself, and even though he's a like very broken and lonely, there's a real competency and like his own identity that he has, where Kylo just doesn't have that. Like he doesn't know whether he's Kylo Ren or Ben Solo. He doesn't know what he should be doing. He is taking cues from Grandpa, who's dead, and he's also taking cues from Snoke, who's actually Palpatine. And he's also maybe taking cues from this pretty girl that is trying to get him to join her, and vice versa. You know.
Yeah, we are Kylo Ren, Ben Solo stans.
Oh
like,
yeah,
through and through, right? Like Kylo is a character who is just torn. He's just torn between light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
But to Chimere's point, I've accepted my darkness.
We also
that's
love
who
that.
I am. And that's awesome.
I contain multitudes, and it's the fact that I feel like I can fix anybody, and I love a bad fictional man.
Truly.
And
truly.
A bad fictional woman. I like them all. I support women's rights and women's wrongs. Yeah, I love that we're getting these different ideas of villains, and that they all have some of the same emotional cores. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we can maybe suggest that like Darth Vader was evil for evil's sake in a certain way throughout the original trilogy, but then you get the prequel trilogy and you're like, oh no, he's evil because he wanted his wife to live, right? Like, and you fully understand that as you see that play out. And so his villainy comes from a sense of pain, and then of course Kylo's villainy, Ben's villainy, comes from a sense of pain and brokenness and not knowing where he is in the world, and also being manipulated in the Force since he was in the womb, like a real, I don't know anything other than this pain that I'm hiding. And then Chimere is also the sense of pain, the sense of loneliness. I like that we get these radically different villain sort of characters who all have the same emotional core. I think that's pretty delicious for me, particularly.
And for me, like Chimere's existence makes me want to go like, ee! You know, like just like jumping up and down.
Yeah.
Because like we won. I don't know what else to say.
Did
like,
we win a Star War?
The Star War, as Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates would say.
I love winning the
truly,
Star War. Like it feels
truly some words.
It feels so good. And I'm not saying like the books are like small wins, because some of the books have had some of the biggest winning the Star Wars moments for me personally, but that's an individual sort of win. Like I am reading that book by myself and on my own time. And so I can text you, Brad, and be like, oh my God, this win. But maybe you haven't gotten there yet, or vice versa. Like we're not all happening at the same time. But with like live action, with movies, it feels like a big win because we're all kind of experiencing it around the same time. So I feel like I've experienced a big win of the Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a feeling that I don't know. There is something in the water with Acolyte that I just haven't felt this amount of buzz, at least in the circles that we're in so long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've loved this show. I can't wait to do like a full rewatch, and maybe I wait for the 4K, although that will probably take a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably do a full rewatch prior to then, but I need special features. I need making of. I want to invest my heart and soul in the show. Acolyte capitalism, I'm done for. I've already had my Black Series figure start showing up. This show means a lot to me is what I'm saying. For a lot of different reasons that I probably will be summed up on a different podcast episode. But yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. It feels like a good win. Feels like a good win.
Absolutely.
What else is a good win? Is our first on-screen appearance of a Kyber crystal bleed.
That was such a transition. That was probably a little bit better than what I was about to transition.
Yeah.
To the same location, but you really, really got it. So thank you for that.
Kyber crystal bleeding is back on the menu. So we first canonically saw it in the Knights of or the Rise of Kylo Ren by Charles Soule, the comic, when Kylo bleeds his crystal shirtless.
Oh,
at the end of that comic.
Yeah. Why have I blacked out so many things about Star Wars? Why did I black that out?
Probably because it came out in like 2020 or 2021. So again,
you know what? That's actually a really valid answer. Thank you.
The last like 4 years is a blur. It's fine. Wow. Okay. So what a scene. First off, like leading up to that moment. So the reason kind of for that is Osha lashing out at Chimere, and that's when the saber bleed happens. But like leading up to that moment, there's a couple like blink and you miss it moments. And I think the first one is when May takes Soule's weapon and, is pointing it at him. When she throws the weapon away, it hits like a piece of metal or shrapnel, whatever, and it breaks the photo emitter of the lightsaber, right? So that way the Kyber crystal on the inside is exposed. I never really caught that was what was happening the first watch.
I did.
Until it was mentioned. Look at you. I'm a fake fan.
See, you are. And I've blacked out a lot of things, but I did catch that. So real fan Sarah, fake fan Brad.
I was like, oh, cool, a Kyber crystal, like not realizing, oh God, the air.
I literally wrote 1 Kyber broken before all my mask notes, and then 2 Kyber broken at that point.
Which, by the way, that moment of May throwing away the weapon, I think was really powerful. It really echoed like the moment of Return of the Jedi, where the Emperor is egging on Luke to kill his father, strike him down, his journey will be complete. Like Chimere is saying a lot of those same words to May in this moment, and then May just has that strength to toss aside her weapon. And like, that's my favorite thing in Star Wars, by the way, is like when people toss aside their weapon and just like choose. In this moment, it's not like, the love of a son and a father in this moment, but here it's sort of the I think this is like more so in the name of like peace and not like peace, but like justice, maybe, like May recognizes that like Soule doesn't deserve to die, but he does need to answer for his crimes. And for that, I want justice. Like I don't, I want him to face the Jedi. I want him to face for his crimes. Like that's justice to me. And so I think that's really compelling for her to toss aside her weapon in that way. The other moment kind of leading up to the Kyber bleed is just the reactions of Soul dying by May and Chimere. Like, what did you make of that? Because they feel like quieter, softer, more accepting reactions. Whereas like typically when you see this sort of thing happen, a lot of people would be shocked or like taken aback or frightened by what happened or by the person who did it. But in this moment, they almost seem like they're supporting her through this action before she, you know, kind of lashes out in a second.
Yeah, May's reaction is like a sense of shock, but then a sense of like she has this so slight smile and then she closes her mouth and it's like, oh my God. And that was what, and I could tell that was the thing that you needed to do. And I support you in that. Like she supports women's rights and women's wrongs in that moment. And then I think Chimere also in that moment is recognizing that that was the thing that he needed for an apprentice or a pupil, that like that was the final step. And she's now taken that leap into darkness in a way that May couldn't. And I think he also recognizes the emptiness of that moment because Osha falls to the ground and she's just kind of staring quite blankly at the ground. And of course, Chimere comes and like puts a hand on her shoulder very gently, and then she lashes out again. But I think he understands what that emptiness feels like, and so he's trying to fill that void a little bit. And I liked both of those reactions quite a lot because they were understanding both of the characters in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I think he sees a lot of himself in Osha in that moment. I think you're totally right. Like he has been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to that line from Night. Even in the revelation of our triumph, we see the depth of our despair. And so I think that line is this moment. Because when we talk about this moment for Osha as a triumph, it is a revelation of triumph, a revelation of freedom. I finally feel unburdened. She finally feels unburdened by what has come before. All the context by which had led up to this moment. I don't know. I'm just thinking of coconuts right now, but in this moment, like she is sensing a triumph, but she's also realizing that despair, that trauma that has been building up in her for so long and has finally sort of come out in this moment. Mm-hmm. It's all been released into this action that ultimately, edges her closer to the dark side. Right. And for her to just, again, like be accepted for that by the folks around her. Again, the show's not saying like, this is a good thing. People should do this more often. But for this perspective and this point of view, and for this character, the show is presenting a point of view that's saying for her and the path that she is on and for who she is inside, mm-hmm. this is what she needed to do. And the show is just kind of showing that journey. It's not absolutely condoning the action necessarily.
Right.
And I think it's cool for the show to do that, right? To like present a challenging perspective and to present something that's a little uncomfy and a little, tough. It's tough to watch in that moment, right?
Definitely.
And you see what she's going through.
Yeah, both this episode and episode 7 are tough to watch in certain moments where it's like I feel uncomfortable about what's happening in front of me because I love these characters, I support these characters, and they're doing the wrong thing right now, but I understand why they're doing it, and that makes it more painful too.
When she turned on the lightsaber, though, what did you think of the Kyber bleed?
I was like, this is the fucking sickest thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's so cool.
This is cool. I was like, Mom, they're bleeding the Kyber. Like they're bleeding the Kyber right now. She's turning evil. Like she can't come back.
They could have easily just went with the red lightsaber right off the bat, igniting, but the freaking transition from blue to red, like, oh my God.
Yeah,
so
the
cool.
fact that you can see it in the crystal itself and then watch the saber transform is great. And it reminds me of my 2005 Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader saber that you could toggle between red and blue. It felt very nostalgic to my childhood. So thank you, Leslie, for that, because she definitely looked into my childhood to make that moment for me.
I hadn't thought about that. Now you're making me think of my childhood, not the lightsaber, but you remember those pens? I don't know if you ever had the pen that, like, the really cool pen that some of the cool kids had.
I wasn't
and it
a
had
cool
all the
kid.
colors, and you could push. You could push, it had like 5 different colors on it, and you could push down the pen color that you wanted to use, and you could push it back up. Yes, you're holding one right now.
I'm holding one right now because I wasn't a cool kid back then, but I am a cool adult. And this is from my public library, guys. It's also yellow, so it's very on brand for me. I'm a cool kid now.
Your Osha moment wasn't killing somebody. Your Osha moment was walking into an Office Depot and buying that pen.
No, I got it from the public library. I think I did the reading program. I read 3 books and I got this pen.
I just completely blanked when you said where you got the pen from. That is my fault. That is a me skill issue.
It is. And I got it from the library. We honk. We love the library.
We do. Yeah, I thought this effect was just incredible though. And the moment of realization on Chymir's face in this moment, but also calling back earlier to the episode, which we haven't talked about, the cave scene where she sees the vision when she puts on the helmet, and when she takes the helmet off, you can actually see the red lightsaber in her eye.
Right.
And then here we see the red lightsaber in her eye. So it's almost echoing, hey, the vision she saw earlier is now come true, but like little did she know it was actually her self that she was seeing, not May. And that kind of speaks earlier in the episode. I think she probably didn't recognize that power within herself. Mm-hmm. She didn't recognize that she was capable of something like that. And then here she is in this moment realizing I am capable of it. I can do it. Like I can tap into my emotions and my darkness.
Well, I think that's it feels like a bit of a failure, not like a failure, but like a bit of an oh shit moment for her, because, you know, I think up until this point, she's still so stuck in her vision of who May is, or who she thinks May is, which she is completely wrong about. She thinks that it has to be May in her vision because she would never.
She's projecting.
Yeah.
May is the villain. May is the bad person. Like Osha,
you're the violent one is what she says in episode 4.
Right. Like Osha, you're the one with the pent up darkness, and like, you got to let it out.
Yeah.
You got to let it out. You know, I think there's some reality too, where maybe May is actually, I don't know if May really like fits in the mold of the Jedi. I don't think she necessarily is going to become a Jedi, but I could see her path being one maybe more of the light side because of that moment when she throws aside the weapon. When she faces Soul, I don't think she had it in her. She never had it in her to kill the Jedi.
No.
Right. And so I think that kind of sets up an interesting maybe future for these characters where, like, yes, they had this emotional moment in the Bunta tree. They parted ways. But I feel like given the memory wipe and given which side they're on at the moment and who they're with, I could see them ultimately being at odds with one another later on. Kind of like we were at the beginning of the series, but like both of them more solidified and more aligned with who they know they are. You know, there's no more questioning. There's no more uncertainty. They both are entrenched in their new ways, and they're both going to lash out.
And this is how the Kazrath device comes into play. You think
I know?
You think I'm joking, but I'm actually not, because I do agree with you that I think they're going to walk further down the path of the lightness and the darkness on their own terms, but functionally they are the same person. They are sisters. They are people who understand each other implicitly, right? And the Kazrath device needs one light side user and one dark side user to do what? I do not know. In my current working theory, I think it is to restore May's memories or restore May's knowledge of Osha, even if not, you know, the memory of everything that happened. But this is what's happening in my mind, my headcanon, because I do think that they're going to continue to be on diverging paths, but those diverging paths in my mind are never oppositional explicitly, because they can't be, because they are something of a creation of Divergence in the Force. They are the same person. They are a dyad, if you will. They are two people who must work together.
What diverges must converge. Right? Maybe. I just made that up.
Convergence, the book.
My only other thought, by the way, on that cave scene, I just thought it was really interesting how Osha kind of unintentionally tapped into her mother's powers and was like trapping Chimere in his own mind in the process, and the genuine look of fear on his face.
Yes.
As he's like, Osha, no, you know, and I think in some respects he recognizes what she's doing because he kind of has a similar power that her and Yord figure out in episode 5. Same power as my mom to get inside somebody's head. But just the fact that he pushed through and had the strength to push through and get that helmet off. I just think that was it was a hot moment.
Right, I agree.
But it was also just like a really good, genuine moment to see like fear on Chymir's face for once, because he's often the person who is so, again, solidified and unfearful to actually be scared. It was kind of a nice change, kind of like a unique, add a little bit of dynamic flavor to his character in that moment.
Right. And he also goes from being kind of amused or interested or delighted that she's put on the mask to that fear and that, oh my God, I need to get it off of her right now or else. So, ooh, spicy.
And speaking of putting masks on and off, we're talking a lot about Chymir's mask, but there's a pivotal moment here where we learn something about Chimir and something that people have been thinking about, which is his connection to Vernestra, which we got to talk about because this is when we find out.
Absolutely.
Right after the Kyber bleed, the Jedi's ship lands. The close-up shot of Vernestra's foot stepping on the grass. The sound effect, the whooshy whooshy sound effect of the Force.
Literally in the subtitles, Force whooshing.
I love a good Force whooshy whooshy sound effect. Always good. But the moment that Vernestra's foot hits that planet and they both recognize one another's presence, which, like, great confirmation. We now know that Vernestra was once Chymir's master. And, like, what a spin, what a twist. Like, to me, that just sets up so many more interesting dynamics for a season 2. If we have Vern and May on one side, Chimir and Osha on the other. We got the character poster for today, the final poster. I mean, not character poster, but Acolyte poster. And those were the only 4 characters on the poster. And so it's really setting up this interesting dynamic for the future of, like, opposite sides, light versus dark. I love that. But the moment that Chimir recognizes she's on the planet, he puts on his helmet instantly. No questions asked. No hesitation. My initial thought goes back to when he's talking to Soul in episode 5 and Soul's like, remove your helmet. Why would you hide yourself from your pupil? And he says, so you can read my thoughts? No. And I think, part of maybe what led Chimir to get the helmet is whatever went down with Vernestra. And maybe he recognizes that Vernestra has some sort of extra vision, power, ability to read minds more so than the average Jedi. Like, there's just something about Vernestra that's different from the rest, and him growing up in that environment with her is like, I'm going to shield my thoughts from any Jedi. And I know her especially. I never want her to sense where I am, that I'm still alive. Which we'll get to that line in a second. Like, you're alive. But, like, what did you think of the helmet? Him putting that on, what does that mean for him and her?
Yeah, it was his tool for the Force against other people moment. Yeah, I know something's clearly happened where he felt like his privacy or his internal thought was invaded, and by her specifically, and he's got that caused some trauma, some scars, and like, oh boy, please tell me more, Vernestra, what did you do? Also, it does kind of confirm what I had said was suggested to us as the audience, but not necessarily true, which was like, well, he got his scars from Vernestra or something that happened alongside Vernestra on his back, which is something that the audience is made to imply, but not explicitly stated by him. So I think that's an interesting confirmation. But also, like, this is why we need more of the Acolyte, because if we literally only got the light whip to kill a bug, which was also in the trailer, that's going to be the lamest thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay. I'm going to complain about that forever. You're specifically going to be like, Sarah, that was like 10 years ago and you're still bitching about it. And I'm like, well, yeah.
The old folks home where I come to visit you on your deathbed and you're like saying something under your breath.
As if you're
and I'm
not
like, what is this,
older than
Sarah?
me. As if you're not older than me. You're going first. I'm visiting you on your deathbed.
Statistically, I'm going first.
You're also a man.
I'm dying. And you have some final words for me. And you're like, I'm still mad about Vernestra's light whip only ever showing up one time to kill a bug. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
And then I die.
And you're like, I want to see my family, not you loser. Like, yeah.
And then I'm like, I wish the Rian Johnson trilogy had come out. But in all seriousness, I think the potential for a Vern and Chimera duel is like the showdown of the century. Like, move over everything else. I need that in my life. The fight choreography would be off the chart.
I know his saber was kind of like absolutely fucked by the end of this episode. However, can you think about the dual sabers against the light whip? Can you think about that? Can you think about that for 2 seconds?
And I love people pointing out that both of their sabers are sabers that hide an element of the saber, you know, like, some rich parallel there. But, yeah, I a lot of like really good insight. You know, Vern tells May later on, he was a pupil of mine before he turned to evil, which is like word for word what Obi-Wan tells Luke in A New Hope, which, you know, for maybe using word for word, maybe that's intentional to say possibly Vern is not telling the whole story there, you know, using those same exact words that
what did she do?
Obi-Wan said from a certain point of view. But what do you think of her saying you're alive? Is that oh my God, you're still alive, I thought I killed you, you're alive? Or is it oh, you're still alive, you must be 100 years old?
Both.
How is that possible?
Literally both.
Both. Yeah, it can be both, to be clear.
Because he was a Jedi a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And she clearly feels a need to cover him up. So she goofed. And now she's dealing with the consequences. And also he's 100 years old. I love a good vampire.
I also think both. I think he is older than he puts on. I think she did something to him. I think it's a Ben Solo situation where, you know, Luke went into Ben's mind and saw something he didn't want to see or something that worried him. And potentially Vern had the same situation. Maybe it ended or, you know, resulted in a duel. And that's how Chimera ends up with the scar on his back. So there are some massive implications there. And I do still wonder, would we see Chimera, a young Chimera in the books at the end of the High Republic Phase 3 epilogue? Vernestra gets her next apprentice.
Because he's old.
Oh, it's a little boy named Chimera. You know, like.
But he wouldn't be named Chimera. He'd be named something else.
Yeah, like I don't know if we're going that deep or if like they're gonna do that kind of like mic drop moment if that takes away from the books. But I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if he is around during the book time period and he is actually that old. Because, you know, there's a certain tragic Sith Lord in the mix, and one could be led to believe that maybe with the help of a said Sith Lord that we'll talk about in a moment, Chimera's life was extended, you know, through dark side powers for quite some time. We know Aslan Rel did it. Chimera could do it too, you know?
And if Chimera could also maintain his youth and not lose his eyeballs and maintain those guns, then, you know, he's doing it better than Aslan Rel did.
Right.
Already, you know? And Plagueis is like, I can iterate on this for sure. But then, oops, here comes little Sheev. And it's game over. And then Sheev is like, I'm going to iterate on this. And then he does. And then Rey and Ben are like, oops. And then it's over.
Great job. You just summed up the whole Star Wars.
I know.
That was it. Before we go to a certain peeper in a cave with a box of scraps, let's talk about the Boonta Tree scene where we get the memory wipe. I love how Chimera just kind of shows up and is like, if I could find you, the Jedi can find you too. Let's get the F out of here.
Yeah, he's like, y'all are being stupid right now with your emotions. Like, I get it. Like, have the moment you need to have, but like, we gotta go.
There is something really silly, by the way, of just how he's set up in that shot of him like standing there in broad daylight with that silly helmet on. And then just like the little smile on it. I don't know. It was just like, it like really hit in the scene of just how ridiculous that looks when it's not dark. But I still love this.
So
I love it.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Really, really emotional scene with Amandla playing these two characters, crying, you know, reciting their childhood, saying, you know, I'm with you and you're with me. And just this like tragic, heart-wrenching moment that as soon as they find each other, they're stripped away from each other again, just by circumstance. Really, really tragic. And I don't know. I just thought it was like a really emotional scene, and I'm glad that they had that privacy and that moment to not necessarily rush through it, given the Jedi were on their tail. Like, you know how you like watch something, you're like, come on, hurry up, hurry up. You know, like I didn't want them to hurry up because I was like, oh, I just want to sit in this moment while they still know each other. And just like them reciting their saying while the memory wipe is happening and her like forgetting it gradually. Oh my God, like ripped my heart out.
I thought that was really well played because we get Osha wanting to slow down time, but also in a sort of, she accepts like, hey, if you let her go, if we give her the memory up or whatever, I'll be your people. We'll do this. And that's a bit of an acceptance of defeat. Again, the feeling of emptiness of the darkness, right? Like I this is the path I now have to walk. And May's self-sacrifice, but also May's self-sacrifice. It's like, oh, isn't this tragic that she has lost all her memories? It's like, yes, but also no, because she's been so dedicated to revenge, to avenging her sister. She gets released from that pain in a particular way, which I think is very interesting and kind of beautiful. Very odd, but like really compelling in the story. But I also think it was a mercy for Chimere to mind wipe May while they're hugging. Like they get that final moment together, and rather than them being apart when it happens. And I thought that was really beautifully done too.
Totally. I think the whole scene played out really well, and I'm excited to see where May ends up in this journey. Her involvement with Vernestra really compels me. And we know they're searching for Chimere. They're searching for the stranger. So ultimately, if that mission is successful, all four of these characters' paths will collide. And when it does, I don't want to be in the room when that happens, because there's a lot more at stake than just these two, Chimere and Osha and the dark side. Sarah.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping you would know. That's kind of why I asked. So this is a little awkward. Little awkward.
But from what I've heard, it's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
Got it.
Right.
Conceal, don't feel.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let it go. Let it go. Anyway.
Yeah, little did we know, not only was the series Kill Bill meets Frozen, it was Kill Bill meets Frozen meets voyeurism, because we got Darth Plagueis in the cave, Lil Peepin' Tom, Ocean Chimere making out, smacking lips. He's just in a cave, watching it all play out. What a sicko.
Honestly, the fact that he's in the cave is it's so much to me. He could have been outside of the cave. But no, he's in there. He was like rifling through Chimere's closet, and like maybe he was messing up the bed just to cause a little chaos. Like, ooh, there's a poltergeist here. No, it's really just Plagueis. Watching from the sidelines.
The Plagueis of it all, like in all seriousness, I cannot believe we have Plagueis canonically on our screens, but the memes that have sprung out of it are just so funny. Like the fan art of Plagueis getting milk in the middle of the night, and like Osha and Chimere are like sleeping there, like, what's going on? And it's just like him at the fridge. Like so many good memes. Like I never wanted to stop. It's just, we're in a whole new territory of memery.
Bob Iger, I know you're listening. I know you're like an avid Friends of the Force listener. So this is a personal appeal to you. Why would you cancel? Why would you cancel? Why would you even think about cancel? Why would you even consider cancellation of a show where Darth Plagueis was brought into the picture? Sir. I know you personally probably have the money to front this show. So does your company. Let's do it.
I thought you were talking to me for a moment, and I was like, I definitely do not have money to front the show. I barely have enough money to front a chicken burrito for lunch, so I'm going to have to get a rain check on that one. Bob, yeah, come on. Darth Plagueis? I mean, wild. What was your reaction when you saw those little fingers clawing against the wall? and you're like, oh, okay. And I thought that was all we were gonna see, and then like reverse shot. Oh my god, it's immune. Oh my god.
Okay.
Holy shit.
Okay. So first of all, I was like, oh, we're seeing the ship from the cave. That's so interesting. Like, oh, that's a really compelling kind of shot. Like they're really going on the next chapter. We're seeing them leave the door and enter a new world, right? And then we see the hands, and then we see his face. I stood up out of my chair and said, nope, gotta turn it off. I'm done. I'm out of here. Plagueis reveal. This is ridiculous. I gotta go. And like paced all the way around my chair and sat my ass back down and kept watching. Actual true story. I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh. I can't believe they just did this. Oh my Lord. And then sat back down. What about you?
I was flipping my mind. I was losing it. I just can't believe we've gone from 2005 Revenge of the Sith, Ian McDiarmid delivering the monologue of a lifetime about Darth Plagueis the Wise, and now we are here pulling Darth Plagueis into official canon again, like for real, right? And we've gotten confirmation from Leslie and everybody it's Darth Plagueis, so it's not even up for question. One, I got to read the Darth Plagueis book.
Mm-hmm.
That's next on my list because Leslie, like I've never been a huge EU person, but Leslie being an EU person makes me want to be an EU person. So I'm going to go read the Plagueis book because like, I don't know, it's gonna be like all the more gratifying as she's like pulling stuff in from Legends. If I know what it is, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I know about that. So I'm compelled to read that book now. And hopefully you will with me. We can go on that journey together. It'd be fun. But I have a lot of questions just about Darth Plagueis's involvement, and one of my main questions is, does Chimere know Plagueis is there, or does he not?
That's the big Q, isn't it? I want to say no, but also I want to say yes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If Chimere knows and he's the apprentice and now he's seeking out an acolyte in order to overthrow the master, that's interesting and compelling. And maybe Plagueis is what's keeping him alive, right? Or maybe Chimere is keeping himself alive and he doesn't know that Plagueis is there, but Plagueis wants this sort of power and now he's going to court him. And that becomes a complicated situation because now there are 3, but we have the rule of 2. Where does Osha play into that? Why is Plagueis there? But also, like, then there's that moment when Soul is like, you two are the same person. When we get a reaction shot to Chimere and it seems like a moment of like realization or something. That's really compelling too. And that plays into this somehow, but I don't know. What do you think?
I read that reaction by Chimere during that scene as I didn't know this reaction. This is news to me because if he has somehow extended his life, he knows about that, right? Like he knows about that all day. What he doesn't know about is this power, the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. He doesn't understand that this place has a vergence that was used to create these twins imperfectly, right? The intention was to create one person and the consciousness got split. And so now they're kind of quote unquote imperfect. It's an imperfect experiment. And so I think that's part of it, but I haven't landed on a decision on Chimere and Plagueis's role. I have a feeling I'm kind of leaning in the camp of Chimere doesn't know about Plagueis being there. Plagueis happens to be there because it's a cortosis rich planet and that's of interest to Plagueis. Now, granted, like how long was Chimere on that island for to like not notice Plagueis? That kind of surprises me. I don't know. But what I do know is that him being in the picture is very, very tough for our heroes kind of coming up. But I want to talk a little bit about just like Plagueis' search for the power to create life and to become immortal. And Leslie was talking about Plagueis in the Collider article where she said, what I think is going on with Plagueis is that he also knows this has happened. He is also aware or will quickly become aware of this aspect of the Force existing. She continues later on and says, if I'm going to tell the story of Plagueis, which I would love to do, absolutely love to do, him pursuing that power is so much more interesting as a storyline than him already having it.
Yeah.
I think that is like the more compelling story, right? Like if we come into the show and Plagueis already knows how to create life, or maybe he was the person the witches consulted to help with that ability. I think that's kind of like the quote unquote easy and maybe like less challenging route. But what I think is really compelling is to say, like, Plagueis didn't even know about this, but then he saw Osha and was like, I'm going to perfect this.
Yeah, he said, I can iterate on that.
Yeah. He's like, I'm gonna take that as a takeaway, and we're gonna circle back to that in our next meeting.
Exactly.
He really said that. And so it kind of makes you think, like, some of the things from the Plagueis novel, like maybe they'll come into play. The fact that in the Plagueis books, Anakin's created because of Plagueis's experiments, because Plagueis is trying to create life, and the Force balances and creates the chosen one to balance. And so it putting all of this into perspective, it really messes with my mind in a good way, because I'm just like, oh my God, this is like the purpose of the show. This is the connective tissue. This is how and why the Acolyte is important, why these twins are important, why these relationships are important, is because they're ultimately going to be the thing that leads to the rise of the Sith. And it, and also to the extent of that, like Soul's decision and the Jedi's decision to interfere on Brundok is what causes the Sith to rise ultimately in some ways, because they're the ones who kind of let the twins loose out of their environment, and the Sith find out, catch wind, try to do the same thing, and the rest is history, you know?
It's almost as if Soul is the key to all of this.
Oh man. But to your point about the rule of two, like, do you feel Chimere and Osha, you know, in the final shot of the of the show and the season?
Are we going to talk about Oshamir? Are we going to talk about Oshamir right
Yeah,
here?
we can. Yeah, let's talk about Oshamir.
Okay.
And a little bit of maybe the future of Oshamir, but thoughts on the scene. I know you have a lot to say, so I want you to start.
So we have like the two scene, like the one scene at 11 minutes in, and the one scene at the very end. My favorite line delivery is at 11:11. You're very welcome. Go and listen to it. It is Manny saying, and now I've lost it. Would you ever consider like trading with me? Like it would said so plainly, and you're just like, oh, that's so yummy. Anyway. That scene when they're recognizing, or he's recognizing her and understanding how strong-willed she is. I love that. And then at the end, we have the lightsaber handhold.
So good.
So delicious. So delicious. I live for this. So we have the first hand moment at the end of the Boonta Tree scene when, you know, she is like, I will train with you. And there's a thumb caress, if you will. It's right, it is in that scene. Okay, it is. Yeah, because he hands her the saber and then he places his thumb on top of her thumb. Oh.
Man knows how to hold a hand.
Right. Oh God, live for it. And then at the end, when he kind of is coming up to her, she's kind of looking into the distance, feeling again. I think emptiness is a bit of the feeling here. He stands next to her. He looks at her and then takes a step closer. Good God. And then he reaches out to hold her hand around the lightsaber again. This is the thing that unites them. This kind of moment unites them.
The symbol also, of the lightsaber.
Yeah, and it's also phallic. Great. Okay, let's move past that.
Also, yeah.
it's true. But this symbol of the saber uniting them in sort of they're not lonely, like they're lonely in their own selves, but they're not alone anymore because they have each other who have both experienced these same emotions. And I think I see that as so powerful. And you see Manny as Chimere take this moment as he's looking off in the distance to like blink and then kind of like swallow. Like he has this like micro expression situation going on in his face. But yeah, I think this moment is beautiful and where the season should have ended, but that's just me. That's literally just me. But yeah, no, I love Oshamir. I think they're delicious, and gorgeous and amazing, and I support their wrongs. Yeah. What else is there to say?
I think this is ultimately where I feel we won the most.
Yeah.
Which was we didn't get the doomed romance possibly yet. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But like,
hey, the K's Wrath device undooms them from their narrative. Okay.
Just the fact that we get these two people who are so resolved, who are in it to win it with each other. And oh God, it's just such a good moment. We learned from interviews that Manny was the one who came up with the hand touch in this final scene, which like, I think Amanda had also said that a lot of the things like romantically or like Manny had a lot of input with some of these like moments,
like the physical intimacy,
the season. Yeah. The physical intimacy of it.
Which if you go back to the one interview where he's like, yeah, we get pretty close. And then Amanda was like, don't say that. They'll get the wrong idea.
Oh yeah.
But also
like,
LOL,
so
it was
good.
not the wrong idea.
People who picked up on that, like my wife like ran with that for so long. And I'm like, oh, like now I'm like, oh my God, like
she saw the vision.
I want to go back and rewatch all the interviews and see how much Manny like telegraphed to us without us like really understanding, because that man played the goofy guy, not only on the show well, but like in real life. He's just like, yeah, I'm just a silly little guy. Like I got to hold a lightsaber once. Like, come on, dude. Like you're the most badass freaking Sith Lord that Star Wars has ever seen, you know? Incredible stuff. But apparently also there was a kiss filmed, which I will say up front, like I want to see the kiss. I'm very glad we didn't get it yet. You know, like I like a slow burn. I like not getting that instant gratification. It wouldn't have felt right given the weight of what just happened with like Osha losing her sister and killing Soul. But at the same time, I have needs and I want to see it. And we'll hopefully see it in season 2 during a sweaty Sith training session. Like I've said, make it happen. Renew the Acolyte. Give me the sexy, steamy Sith training session.
Yeah.
I want it.
Yeah. So I wish they had never told me that they filmed the kiss.
And everybody else.
I was living such a peaceful life. But they have to understand that I'm not normal. So it ruined me. I also feel good about how it played out. Like I think the handhold was the right move. But here's the deal. I am not a girl who's like, I'm here for the slow burn. Oh my gosh. I mean, I do love the tension, but like, and I love the yearning. Like I live for that stuff, but I'm also like, just kiss already. The Barbie dolls, like, just kiss already. So now I feel bonkers. I feel crazy town. I simply cannot be normal about this. So I will pretend that I never saw it, but in reality, I did. The fact that they told us that there was a kissing scene that was actually filmed makes me a little feral. It's fine.
Yeah, they could have just said nothing. Like Twisters had footage that leaked, you know, to the internet or whatever of behind the scenes of them kissing. Like they couldn't escape that narrative.
No,
Star Wars could have just like, you know, flown under the radar.
Right.
I have thoughts on Twisters. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm upset the kiss
Brad's
situation.
Like, I need the smooches in my movies.
I need smooches in my movies about severe weather events. But
exactly.
I want to jump to this quote from Manny about him coming up with the hand touch and what it means. And he says, quote, I think it alludes to something more romantic, but it also alludes to something that I think a lot of Star Wars fans are yearning for. In this IP, you have ships like Reylo, and you have all those relationships that people just innately want to see. These romantic relationships that people want to see in Star Wars. So Leslie was like, give the people what they want. Let's lean into this. And hopefully we can explore more of that again in a possible season 2 and subsequent seasons. Manny, you're talking subsequent seasons, my man. I'm all for it. Give me all the hand touches. 5 seasons worth, please.
Manny is so president of Oshamir Nation. And I just want to smooch him on the forehead and say, thank you, sir. Because
he really is.
Because like he's out here, he knows what the girlies want. And girlies as a gender neutral term. He knows what the girlies want. And he's going to give the girlies the goods, which is the hand touches, the thumb caresses.
So much. Like, I love too that he's like sharing fan art. He shared some photos after the finale dropped of like him and Amandla. And it just feels good, not only for the show to lean into romance, but like for the actors to acknowledge it as well. You know, they're not like shying away from it. There's no ambiguity. They're just like, yep, this is what we did. This is what we wanted to give people. And that feels good, you know, and, you know, him talking about the fact that like people he knew were hopping on board when they heard about the romance, you know, and people were starting to watch the show and, you know, sending him texts and comments. And he said in another interview with Gizmodo with James Whitbrook, like people telling him, I haven't seen Star Wars, but I will for this. Yeah. Referencing Oshamir, you know, and like that's so, it's just so good to hear. It's just like so good to hear. Like there's a market for romance. Like look at Bridgerton. And you know, this is the first
crazy people are going over Bridgerton. You know,
yeah, like, and like I hesitate to say like Star Wars has like been lacking romance because there's been so much heteronormative romance in Star Wars for so long.
Totally.
But like I do acknowledge that like we haven't really had like explicit on-screen romance. Like Reylo was great, but it was like it veered between subtext text, but never really settled on one or the other. And like this is just so overtly capital T text that it's refreshing. It's like Onadala text, you know? And that's something we really truly haven't had in like 2 decades.
But they don't have to keep it a secret.
Right.
It's not like, oh, we have to be other people.
Totally. Yeah. We are living in the same apartment with our weird Sith Lord roommate who likes to peep through the window when we're kissing.
Right. Exactly.
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise and his roommates. And they were roommates. Is that actually a Plagueis meme? Somebody make that a Plagueis meme and they were roommates. Oh, man,
about
I miss
Plagueis and Oshamir. You know what's going to be really weird? And I'm saying gonna be really weird because we are getting a second season. Bob Iger. Damn it.
Bob?
Is that just like so many Star Wars characters these days, his name is the blank right now. Baby Yoda became Grogu only after like a solid calendar year and people still call him Baby Yoda. I fear we will never get away from Chimere once we hear whatever his name actually is.
I feel like it's possible we might never know his name. I mean, I guess Vernestra could be the one to reveal it, but
do you think that we would have a whole romance where she doesn't say his name? Because he wants to say her name like every 2 seconds.
But here's the thing. If we learn Chimere's name, I don't think that necessarily is the same extent of Grogu where we start calling Baby Yoda Grogu. Chimere's old name is a part of himself that he rejects. Let's just say his name was John.
I guess.
John was meant to be a Jedi. John was trying to fit the mold of a Jedi. Chimere knows he was always trying to be somebody he didn't want to be.
Wait a second. What are we going to do with the ship name when he has a different name?
We keep it the same. He is Chimere. He identifies as Chimere. That is his name. He has left his identity behind. He is no longer who he once was.
But what's Osha going to call him? Chimere? Because she definitely doesn't know his name at this point.
Oh, well, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. True.
So if it's like his name is, if his name is John, is it Osha John? John Osha?
Johnamir?
John. No, because the mirror is coming from Chimere.
Do we have another Bob in the room? Another Bob.
But do you know what I'm saying? Like Star Wars in their naming of, or therefore not naming of characters, the client, you know, Baby Yoda not getting a name. Like there are so many other, the Mandalorian, that being the literal, like the big one until it's Din Djarin, but people still call him Mando and the Mandalorian. Like what are we gonna do with the ship name when he's not when he's not Chimere anymore? I'm saying when because Bob, we're getting that second season.
I think it's just gonna say Oshamir. I think it's just whatever his name was before don't matter because he is Chimere. He's gonna introduce himself as Chimere. Hey babe, I'm Chimere, by the way.
Hey babe, I'm Chimere.
Here's some soup. Here's some soup.
Do you think he makes a mean 9 egg stew? Do you think he knows how to make 9 egg stew?
I was just thinking that. I don't know. I do think we should introduce Chimere's soup as an option at Galaxy's Edge.
You think has Chimere canonically been to Batuu?
Chimere's quality soup. Chimere's
quality stew. Stew is a more satisfying word in this sense.
Chimere's quality stew. I like that. But when you're making stew, you got to stir that pot a lot. And I think Plagueis is going to be doing a heck of a lot of stirring of some pots coming up. I want to jump as kind of our final talking point of the season and kind of looking forward to a potential season 2. We could be just talking nonsense. It may or may not happen, but Leslie Headland saying, quote, in her interview with Collider, "It is framed as romantic, but I do think, again, it's not going to turn out great. I think if he's training her, one to hold power, one to crave it. So they're starting off as equals, but what's going to happen? Like in Romeo and Juliet, it's amazing because right at the beginning, they're like, okay, these two die, let's start the play. As you're watching this incredible love story unfold, and it's one of the most beautifully iconic plays ever written, in the back of your mind, you're like, this is not going to turn out well. And I want to clarify, they, being Osha and Chimere, are not necessarily doomed or destined to fail as a team, but the Sith rule of 2 denotes a power imbalance, which clearly, due to the final shot, is not their relationship. Also, Plagueis complicates their journey as Sith because we know his apprentice is eventually Palpatine. They will not defeat him," end quote. So my question to you, Sarah, is do you think Chimere and Osha are doomed by the narrative?
No, because I refuse for Star Wars to be a tragedy for once in my life. I refuse. I'm sorry. They can't be doomed by the narrative because I say so. The K's are at the vice. Them just not being Sith.
They form the Knights of Ren together and they leave and we find out that the Knights of Ren were formed by two hot people who loved kissing.
I love that story. That would be sexy. Okay. I hate the idea that they are doomed by the narrative because they both have to be Sith now they've embraced this particular form of the dark side. I don't think that needs to be the case. Maybe I'm thinking a little too out of the box for TV Star Wars, but like, I don't think this needs to be the case. And I feel really strongly about it. Listener, I'm standing again. I've picked up the mic and I'm standing. That's when you know it's serious for me. I feel like they can have their happy ever after, even if it's not happy. Do you know what I'm saying? Reva gets to live. Do we know if she succeeds? Do we know if she has a happy ever after? In fact, she probably doesn't, but she gets to live. She gets to move forward. She gets to have a life. This is also what I fear for Avar and Elzar. Do they get the happily ever after? Romance in Star Wars never ends well. Can this end neutrally? You know, I don't know, but I continue to maintain hope that it will, even for our characters who are villainous or are bad. Plagueis being there, they don't defeat him, but that doesn't mean they have to be doomed by him. They can go to Planet X and go live their timey-wimey, wibbly wobbly life, okay?
With all their baby nameless.
With their baby nameless. That'd be cute. Yeah. That'd be cute.
I'm in agreement with you that I really don't want them to be doomed by the narrative. Now, if they are doomed by the narrative and it's told in a very compelling, multi-season, fleshed out way, it depends how I'll feel by that point. But to your point, I would love to see like a true romance, like not turn out tragically for once. And I do think there is something interesting to explore about the rule of 2, and we know Chimere is somebody who rejected the institution of the Jedi, right? And
right.
I like the thought of them also rejecting the opposite end of that and being like, the Sith rule of 2, screw that. We're not about that shit. Like, we're going to go start our own thing. And that could be the Knights of Ren. It could be something completely different, or they could just take up a life of farming. I
support them farming.
They're actually Galen Erso's neighbors in Rogue One.
That's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute. Yeah. They'd be old.
Jen Erso called him Uncle Chimere, Auntie Osha, you know.
That's cute. Yeah, I just I don't like the idea that they are stuck, because I don't think that's the case, and I don't think it needs to be a capital T tragedy either. Could that be compelling? Certainly. But I think, would that be fulfilling? No.
I agree. And I think, to Leslie's point, the fact that she's even acknowledging they're not necessarily doomed by the narrative, I think is important for her to like acknowledge that and to say, like, I know what you're all thinking. It could happen that way. It might not happen that way, but they're, there is an avenue where it might not happen, and we'll have to wait and see. There's kind of a bittersweet aspect to more seasons, because in some sense, if the show ends here, you can make your own fanfic and you can play it out in your mind how you want it to play out.
That's true.
Yeah.
If
the show continues, it runs the risk of maybe having an unfulfilling end to this character story, right? And I have full faith in Leslie. I have full faith in the creative team for season 2 and beyond. I need season 2 is what I'm saying. Like, I think there's so much more story to tell and so many more ways to connect to the Phantom Menace, to the prequels, to the Rise of the Sith, while also giving us like fulfilling journeys for these characters. I think we're just scratching the surface. And I also like the idea that if Osha and Hymir do go off and do their own thing, and Plagueis is like, guess I'll get a new Padawan. Oh, who's this little kid from freaking Naboo? Okay, I'll take him, and you're like, oh my God. Hymir and Osha's rejection of both the Jedi and the Sith led to the rise of the Sith, and so that's kind of an interesting angle to think about. The rejection of both of these binaries, the rejection of this binary is what like kind of caused the imbalance in the first place by these, this group. So I don't know. There's so much more to tell.
Yeah.
While we're talking about Oshamir, though, I do want to say I loved when Osha muted Hymir in his own ship. I thought that was hilarious. She was like, "You're done yapping. Yap timeout."
She said, "I'm the captain now."
I love that.
Yeah, that was really...
I don't know. His reaction too in that moment was just like, my ship is off.
Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. Wow. Great stuff.
Oh my God. So freaking good. So good. So good. Wow. We've talked like a lot about this finale. 2 hours. I think this is our longest episode, and we truly did save the best for last. I had a great time talking through this.
Me too.
Any other final thoughts on the finale? Any odds and ends that we might have not gotten to or talked about? Anything else for this episode? Again, we'll have another episode, listener, about the entire season. But for this episode, Sarah, any thoughts?
For this episode, I mean, this is also, we're all talking the entire season at this point, but
yeah.
Why was the Virgin so important? Why was proving the Virgin so important? I mean, that's not like it's now broken and I don't know, like, I'm not gonna watch it anymore. You've ruined the plot because I don't have an answer to this question. But why was Soul so stuck on proving this right? And why was just having Osha there not enough? Well, part of that was because then he'd have to admit that May is gone and that was his fault. But also Basil just has an interesting moment. Also, I should say that I'm kind of a Mog hater. I'm really sorry to Mog, but one specific thing that bothers me about him is that he wears his tabards really far apart. Look at his costume again. His tabards just sit so far away from each other.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on those. I appreciate Basil for stopping Soul during the asteroid chase because Soul was definitely going to kill Osha or kill May. Like, his targeting computer was like beep, 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 going to shoot. And Basil's like, absolutely not, pulling the wires. So you go, Basil, true hero of the episode. I read the need to discover the virgins as two things. One, it's like the Jedi gatekeeping. Hey, if this powerful thing exists, we have to control it and make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And then there's the personal reason for it, which I think is like Soul's justification of, if I can prove there's a virgins here, I can show why I did what I did.
Right.
And why I acted the way I did,
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like two-pronged for him. It's like for the greater good and also for himself. That's at least how I read it. I don't know if do you agree with disagree with that, or maybe like thinking along the same lines potentially.
That makes enough sense to me. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Those are my only thoughts to your odds and ends. I think my only odd and end would be like Yoda again, puppet Yoda being there. I love two green people talking to each other, going exactly like both liars in their own right.
Two green liars.
Two green liars. But in all honesty, I think Vernestra's speech to May about Soul, saying he was a kind, brilliant, compassionate man. He did a terrible thing. He made a mistake. a mistake he lived with for so long. It twisted his mind. He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister. And I think like her just acknowledging that at the end kind of shows Vern is different than the rest. Like she is still protecting the institution, but she tells May, the Jedi have failed you. She acknowledges the Jedi's failings in that moment. She says, I'm going to make this right, but I need your help. You know, it's a little quid pro quo at the end, but I think that Vern, knowing who Vern is, I think she has a heart. She tells Soul, I'm sorry, friend. Like, she's not a heartless person. She is telling a lie to uphold the institution, which is a bad thing to do. But I don't consider her totally heartless or totally a bad person per se. You know,
I don't think anybody here is necessarily. She definitely might be going to hell, maybe. But like, is she evil? No.
I do love her saying, does the word Osha mean anything? And somebody, I think it was Dave Itzkoff, tweeted that image and said like me when I climb a rickety ladder at work or something. And I just love that. I just love that her name is Osha, and we need to often remember that more. Yeah, because it's so good. It's so good.
It's great. We love that.
But yeah, what a finale. I feel completely fulfilled. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Brad,
for being here. This has been a lot of fun. 8 episodes. You know, we started in the premiere at the El Capitan Theater back in May, and here we are now concluding the season. What a journey it's been. Listeners, thank you for tuning in every week on our discussions. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from people commenting, you know, they're excited when these episodes come out and they're having a good time. So like,
thank you.
We appreciate the feedback. Let us know what you think of the episodes if you're enjoying it. Leave us a review if you've been enjoying the Acolyte coverage. Help other folks find these discussions and tune in as well. But it's been such a pleasure getting to be in your ears for a little over 2 months and talk about the show. And we're not going anywhere because we have so many more episodes. We have 2 interviews backlogged right now that are coming out in the next couple weeks. We got some book discussions right around the corner. Some more phase 3 of the High Republic. Lots of good stuff from us coming up. So thank you again for all of your support and just for tuning in.
Yeah. For those of you who've been waiting for Temptation of the Force, it's happening. It's happening. We promise.
Oh, it's definitely happening.
Yeah.
Trust me.
So seriously, thank you for joining us for this High Republic adventure. If you enjoyed this High Republic adventure, join us for others because we have so many, both backlist episodes all the way back to Light of the Jedi and all the way to now and into the future. We love the High Republic. We love Star Wars. So thanks for having all these conversations with me, Brad. And thank you, whoever's listening, for joining us in those. It really does mean a lot that we're all experiencing Star Wars together. That's great.
Communally. Every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah. Why are we moving away from these? Never ever do a 3 to midnight release ever again. Like, I'm sorry, because I know this really only applies to like North Americans. But anyway, yeah. the everybody attempting to watch like a prestige television show, 20 minutes before work. That was bonkers. That was bonkers crazy. Imagine what they could have done if it was on quote unquote prime time. Anyway,
Truly.
I have to give a special thank you to our Patreons who do sincerely help keep the lights on here at Friends of the Force. So they are Brian, Ben, Cheryl, Clay, David, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Krista, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nathan, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Sky Talkers, Tom, and Travis. Thank you all very much for your support. We're so grateful. And to every single person out there, it's the summer where we are. It's hot. So make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you're staying healthy and also getting that vitamin D. Get outside when you can.
Yeah. Now, I'm embracing my inner Chimere. I'm getting swole AF this summer.
Okay.
Operation Big Bold Biceps is a go. I am ready. Give me Acolyte Season 2. I need more of Chimere in my life, more Oshamir. I'm unhinged. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I just ruined the vibes.
You definitely did, but this makes a great last appeal to Bob, who we know is listening to this episode.
Who's still listening to 15 in.
So
every Bob, time. Every time I become unhinged, it's the 15.
Yeah,
it's the 15 minute mark
on the 15s.
Somewhere.
Yeah. So Bob,
a multiple of 15.
Please renew the Acolyte. We're begging. We're begging at this point.
We're literally begging.
Yeah, seriously. And with that, we're gonna sign off now. So Brad, do the thing so I can say the thing.
Thank you, everybody, once again for listening. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, may the force be with you always.